Hey guys, Mrs. Foss here. I want to talk to you today about one of my favorite digital media tools, Desmos Graphing Calculator. I'm pretty sure you all know by now that I absolutely love this thing. So I want to make sure that you guys know how to use it, and that way maybe you will begin to graph on here so you can see things that you wouldn't be able to see on your graphing calculators. So to start off with, today we're going to be talking about your graph options. And if you follow my highlights over to here, you see this little wrench, and that's your graph settings. And I'm going to click on that and get rid of this spotlight. And you'll see some settings that you can use for your graph. Projector mode is designed for teachers who are attaching their computer to a projector to show a class. You can see the lines are darker and the grid's a little bigger. You don't really need to worry about this, so just keep it clicked off. The next thing you'll see is your grid options. And you could either have a regular Cartesian coordinate, which we're all used to, or you can have a polar coordinate graph, which I'm sure is kind of new to most of you. And honestly, I don't think a whole lot of you will be using this unless you're in some kind of advanced trig or AP Calc class. So we're going to put it back on Cartesian coordinate and leave it there. This option is for arrows on the ends of your axes. So this puts arrows on all four ends, and this puts arrows just on the positive y and the positive x. Your preference whether or not you want to have arrows. Excuse me. This here, axis numbers, would be the numbers down here or to the left of the y-axis, and you could choose to either show or hide them. I don't really know when you would want to hide them, so let's leave them on. And this one is for minor grid lines, meaning these light gray lines in here, and you could either turn it off or on. I suggest that you leave them on. Right now I am in a square graph, meaning that my x and y axes both go from -10 to 10, but if I click on this, it will change it a little bit so that you're actually more proportionate. Okay, so let's look at our axis options. They're both the same for x and y. You could set your domain or your range. You can add labels. So for example, let's say I'm graphing time versus distance. I just add my label and it'll show up. And for my y, if I put distance, it shows up over here. Right now, that's not anything to worry about, so we're going to get rid of it. All right. This is very much like your Windows settings on your graphing calculators. It just tells you how big or small you want to make your graph, so you can change these numbers as you please. Step is what each major grid line would show. So for example, right now each major grid line is showing in increments of 2. And if I wanted to change that, now it's showing them in increments of 1. And I could do the same thing with my y, so I'm pretty much working on the same scale. Okay? But now I'm going to show you where it gets really cool, and this is very helpful for plotting trigonometric graphs. So on your x-axis, I'm going to make this in terms of pi. So instead of -10, I'm going to make it -2 pi. And I'm going to make this one +2 pi. I'm kind of using a combination of my keyboard and this virtual keyboard down here. Now if you notice, these still aren't in terms of pi. So I have to change my step. And the best way to choose your step probably would be to take your period, divide it by 4, and use that. But for now, I'm just going to use a step of pi over 2. So pi divided by 2. And now you could see my increments are in pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, etc. So the halfway point between 0 and pi over 2, which would be right here, is pi over 4. Halfway between 0 and pi over 4 would be pi over 8, etc. This makes graphing trig functions so much nicer. Now you don't have to do that with your y-axis because in trig the range is going to be in numbers. It's not going to be in terms of pi, so you don't need to worry about that. The last thing on here is whether or not you're in radians or degrees. So for you trig kids, you're going to be in radians. Geometry kids, you're going to be in degrees. And for algebra or advanced algebra, it depends on what your teacher wants. So make sure you're aware of that. All right, some other buttons over here. I'm going to turn off my graph settings. Is the plus and the minus. That's your zoom in and zoom out, and it will zoom in and zoom out on the point that you're specifying. And this is your default zoom, the home button. Another thing you could do with this graph that you can't do on your graphing calculator is just move the graph around. And this will help you locate any intersections or maxima or minima very easily instead of having to go to your calculator and adjust your viewing window and do zoom out and Z-box and all that stuff. All right, so much easier. Trust me. We can also show more of the graph if I go over to these arrows and click on Hide List. And now you can see my whole screen or my whole tab is actually the graph. And I'm going to put it back. And we're going to talk about this little area another time. Today we're just talking about the graph settings. And I believe that's about it. So I highly encourage you who haven't already to go and download Desmos onto your phone or your tablet. It is a great free tool for you to use. And like I said, it's probably got more features than your graphing calculator. So go use it. Peace out, Mrs. Foss.